We are slowly getting everybody in, but it's great to have you all. There are probably some minutes while people are joining in. So thank you. You can, for the meantime, we're gonna organize an activity for us to meet. But if you want to start introducing yourself in the chat box, that would be great. And so we'll see how, people from different countries and different sectors. So this is wonderful. So let me start. I will introduce myself today. I will be the moderator of today's workshop. So my name is Alicia Jimenez. I work at Earth Charter International and the Center of Education for Sustainable Development, based at the UP's University for Peace campus. And well, this is, as you of course know, the workshop on Sustainable Development Goal 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, and is a workshop that is organized by University for Peace and us as the Earth Charter, and UNAI, which is the UN United Nations Academic Impact. And the main reason is because the University for Peace was chosen by this UN Academic Impact as the hub of the SDG 12 on responsible production and consumption for the period of 2021 and 2024. So this is why we joined forces. And of course, Earth Charter International is based here at the UPs. We feel as we are UPsers. So we want to organize this workshop to share good practices of consumption and production carried out by higher education institutions, which promote sustainability, regeneration, also motivating participants and awareness that leads to action towards the reduction of the impacts generated by humans on this Earth community, this Earth as our home. So this is the reason why we're here. We are gonna as well generate awareness about what is happening in the world, about all the areas related to SDG 12, as we're gonna learn is more complex than we think. But anyway, we'll have time for this. So I hope many of you can stay the whole time. We are recording as well, and we'll be happy to share the recording with you. So to start, I would like to welcome Juan Carlos Sainz Borgo to give us some welcome remarks. He's the Vice Rector of the University for Peace. Thank you, Juan Carlos.
Gracias, Alicia. Good morning, good afternoon, buongiorno, bonjour, in all the different time zones that I can see here. It's my honor to welcome you all to this activity between the Earth Charter and the University for Peace, for this activity within the framework of collaboration with the United Nations Academic Impact. I would like to especially greet Professor Omar Hernandez, who is just next to my box in the Zoom. That is our focal point at the United Nations Secretary General's office. As you know, the University for Peace is an institution created by the General Assembly of the United Nations to train human resources on peace. But clearly, peace is not just the absence of conflict, as we can see right now in the whole world. The peace is something more complex. And within the United Nations and in the community around the United Nations, we believe that the state of peace should be that the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, could be achieved globally. That could be a state of peace. That's why the university is so committed with the idea to work and promote the Sustainable Development Goals. And as Alicia Jimenez already mentioned, we received the honor from the Academic Impact to be the global hub for the SDG 12 of sustainable consumption. Clearly, we have a more sustainable consumption. We will be able to avoid many conflicts about hunger, food distribution, many topics. So that's why the University for Peace, with a mandate to work in peace, is involving of this promotion of a global view of peace. So I would like just to say these very, very short words to welcome you all. And I would like to give the floor again to Alicia to continue the work. Please enjoy this talk, and I will be here listening carefully what you're saying, because I think it's an extremely relevant topic. Thank you very much. I would like just to finish thanking Gabriela Montero and Alicia to organizing this activity, and also to Omar Hernandez for his support. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, for your kind words. And also, well, I'd like to welcome Omar Hernandez. He's the program manager of the United Nations Academic Impact. So Omar, maybe you can say a little bit of words. Probably many here in the audience are as well members of academic institutions like universities, higher education institutions. So maybe they're wondering, how a university can become a SDG hub, and also learning about, what is this initiative that for me was new. I learned about it some time ago, and that was very interesting. And so, yeah, we'll pretty much looking forward to hear from you, Omar. Thank you so much.
Well, buenos dias. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation to the University for Peace to this, to address this distinguished audience. I'm speaking on behalf of the United Nations Academic Impact, which is an initiative housed in the Outreach Division of the Department of Global Communications here at the UN Secretariat in New York. We are an initiative that was created in 2010 by former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the idea being to liaise the United Nations with the institutions of higher education around the world to harness that intellectual potential, to promote intellectual social responsibility, and to take advantage of all the resources and the expertise, the knowledge that lies in the universities and colleges, but also the amount of passion, creativity, and innovation that lies in the academic world, particularly when it comes to students, but also the great relevance of the scientific research conducted in the universities, as well as the legitimacy that higher education institutions have in order to advocate about the ideas, campaigns that are being carried out by the United Nations, and to amplify the messages coming from the UN leadership concerning critical aspects of the global agenda, from peace and security to sustainable development and everything in between. As of now, we are a network of 1,612 universities and colleges in 164 countries, including the University for Peace, which is a unique university given its very particular relationship with the United Nations. And based on the reports that we have received from the university and the information we have compiled and gathered over the past few years, we're fully aware of the commitment that not only the country of Costa Rica, where it is located, but the university in particular has towards sustainable development. Hence, why it was chosen as the hub of our initiative for Sustainable Development Goal number 12 in particular. In case some people might wonder, what's the relationship between sustainable development when we talk about peace? Because it seems for some people that there's no relationship whatsoever between the two concepts. Sustainable development, first of all, is a concept that is human-centered, that is about the preservation of the capacity to meet the needs of future generations, and the idea that sustainable development is all about enhancing and improving the dignity and the lives of everybody. But also equally important is to acknowledge that there is a correlation between peace, security, and sustainable development, and this was already laid out quite well by the late Secretary General Kofi Annan in his report in Larger Freedom in 2005, when he mentioned that indeed, poverty is not a cause for war, but certainly poverty does, cause instability and political violence, and vice versa. War is not the cause for poverty, but war, atrocities, and violence actually hamper and prevent development from happening. And he said that in the aftermath of World War II, when the UN was created precisely for many purposes to maintain international peace and security, prevention was key. And he said, and I quote, "If we really want to prevent conflict, we have to start by reducing and eliminating poverty and promoting sustainable development." So there is a correlation between sustainable development and peace. And if we go back to the very famous Brundtland Commission report from 1986-87, we have to recall when they say, well, whenever you have poverty as a being endemic, the odds and the chances to have natural catastrophes and other catastrophes increases quite significantly. So the more poverty you have, the more instability you will have, the more political instability you will have, the more violence you have, and then the chances and the odds for armed conflict will significantly increase. So definitely we need to promote sustainable development, not only because, and this is a misconception that some people have, it's a purely environmental and ecological term that can only be seen from that perspective. But if we really understand what's the meaning of peace, if we really want to avoid conflict, if we really want to have a more inclusive, healthy planet for all, we really need to make sure that the 2030 agenda is not an utopia, but rather a tangible and concrete reality for all. And while we're here talking about these things, many people around the world, particularly the most impoverished ones, particularly the most vulnerable communities, are really waiting to see action and decisions being taken to help them. And when it comes to responsible consumption and production, actually is one of the key aspects that perfectly ties with the entire 2030 agenda. We just had the SDG Summit last month here in New York, and the overview is not good. It doesn't seem very promising, but this is a crisis where that also generates opportunities to rethink the way we do things, to rethink the future we take, and to rethink our role in this world. And the role of academia, the role of civil society is more important than ever before. And I thank you very much. I'm sorry to say I have to jump to another meeting right now happening behind me, but I'm looking forward to read about the conclusions of this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for giving us this overview. And it's great to know that, well, from 2010 already, this has been happening. So this is wonderful. This is wonderful, and thank you. So now we will have to take just a few minutes to learn more about who is here in the room. For the meantime, let me share here in the chat box. Oh, wait, where is the chat? Oh, hey, here. So if you see here in the chat, there's a link for this is like the Mentimeter. So if you can, just click there. So we want to know where you are now, like which country. So we'd like to know a little bit where you are, and also which sectors are represented. So let me share the screen. Do you see the screen, Gabi or Amanda? Do you see it? Okay, good. Okay, so we'll see. So we have, well, several people from Costa Rica. It's the majority of us are here. From the US, from the Netherlands, that's wonderful. From England, also from Spain. Some more people from Costa Rica. Wonderful. Very good. Very good. Costa Rica is getting big. Wow, most important. No, just kidding. Okay, wonderful. We'll see here from Dubai. Yay. Okay, that's good. We have people coming in. People moving. Let's see the other. We'll be back to see if people have. Okay, this is in which sector do you work, and as well you can also move. There's another. So okay, so we have people from universities, from NGOs, from others. So maybe we'll learn about what are others, from private companies, NGO and higher education now, more from other primary, secondary education. That's wonderful as well. It's great. Let's see in the previous one if we have different. Okay, no, Costa Rica, Netherlands. It's great, but let's continue on this one. It's okay, the majority from universities. This is wonderful. Okay, and then the other would be great to learn if someone can share in the chat. What would be the other? Let me see if I can get the chat. Oh, I can send the link again. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see that. Oh, yeah, someone just shared. Thank you. Thank you, Lee Ray Davis, for sharing. And he's joining from Austria. Okay, so this is great to see. We're coming from a diverse group as well, from higher education, NGO, private companies, no one from the government yet, and from other sectors. If someone can come, well, maybe if they're freelancers as well, that's interesting. That's good. Okay, and let me see if we have some changes here. Oh, from Ethiopia, Justo, well, that's a new one. Okay, this is great. This is wonderful. Although I saw as well, I think Lorna down, which I know from Jamaica. Maybe she hasn't been able to go, but I know Lorna from Jamaica is there. Oh, from Vietnam. Ah, Jamaica, there you are. From Vietnam. That's great. Oh, I like this. This is very nice. Any responses? Let's see what else. And here, very good. Okay, thank you for sharing this. I think the majority of you have already responded. Let me stop sharing, sorry. That's great. Nonprofit health center. Oh, that's good, Hannah. Okay, so yeah, so now we see a little bit of the countries. We have the different countries being here. We have different sectors. So I think this is a good environment, a good context for a nice dialogue that we can have today. So what do we want to do today? So we're gonna have an opportunity to learn from different people. So we'll start with Nika Salvetti. I'll introduce her soon, but a little bit about the dynamic today, the methodology. The idea, this is like a workshop style. So that's why you see we are in a meeting room. You can even open your mics, etc. But for the interest of time and for the interest of as well to respect the speaker, so we ask you to keep your audio and your mic closed if you're not going to speak, and you can use that raising the hand if you really want to say something. But so if you have a question or something for the speaker or something clarification, you can also write in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. So the idea is that we're going to have a presentation, and then in the meantime we can have questions. Then we'll sort of like move around, try to relax a little bit, and then continue with other activities. So we're going to have we're going to listen to Nika, and then we're going to listen a little bit about EDR Charter from Amanda and me. Then we're going to listen as well about another important topic related to sustainability consumption with Casey Harrison. And then we'll have an interactive activity with Gabby Montero. So as you can see, we're going to have that type of interaction. And the idea is as well, all of you get this, the opportunity to learn from each other as well. The chat is there open, so please use that one, and as well the hand if you want to talk. Okay, so that's the plan for today. And we are gonna start the first moment of learning and interaction with Nika Salvetti. She's a professor, visiting professor at the University for Peace, but she does many other things. Nika Salvetti is a researcher and practitioner with a wide-ranging experience in the field of management, social responsibility, sustainable economic development, and post-war economic recovery. So she teaches here about social responsibility and correct me if I'm wrong, Nika, but I know you are one of the founders of the Responsible Management and Sustainable Economic Development Master's Program here at the University for Peace. It's a wonderful program, and we'll hear more about it from Nika. And well, she has many degrees already. She's MS Master's in Post-War Reconstruction from the University of York, UK, Bachelor in Economics from La Sapienza University of Rome, Italy. Well, Nika is originally from Italy, but she has lived in many countries. And I was very interested to read about her PhD research, which was focused on local culture, regulations to determine responsible approach to ready-made garment industry in Bangladesh. She's written a lot about that topic. Maybe we'll learn a little bit about that too. So Nika, I'll give you the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. First of all, I would say thank you for the organizer, for Earth Charter and UPeace. I think it's a very, very important subject and theme that we really have to pay attention on, especially during these days. And thank you also for inviting me to share my perspective and view on the topic. My approach is a bit of because looking at the dynamic of your workshop, I thought, okay, let's go back to understanding also what SDG 12 is and means and implies, because I feel that nowadays, as the representative of UN said, there is still a misconception or interpretation about the concept of sustainability. And I feel personally that there is also sort of disconnection from the role of social responsibility. So for me, SDG 12 is a sort of fundamental and relevant, I would say, topic that try to reconnect or recreating this link and interdependence, I would say, between what is sustainability as a whole, so not only environmentally, and social responsibility at societal and individual level. So allow me to introduce, to share my PowerPoint presentation. And please, I would invite everybody, if you have any urgent question, clarification, or even additions to what I'm presenting, feel free. So let's have a dynamic, I would say, interaction. Otherwise, just write down in the chat and we will try to address it. I hope to have time to have Q&A at the end, but no matter, stop me or intervene whenever you feel it more appropriate. Okay. Let me know if you... Can you all see it?
Yeah, you just have to put it in presentation mode. Maybe.
Yes.
That's
okay. Let me see if, yes. Okay, so let's go back to the basics in a way. What do we mean and what is actually SDG 12? Fundamentally, we say that SDG 12 highlights the need to actually make fundamental change in the way society consume and produce. And it's about actually looking at, or I would say, targeting all actors of society, considering that all of us, we are responsible to contribute to this change. So it's not an issue that one specific stakeholder is, I would say, the more responsible, but I think especially looking at supply chain and overall society, we are all co-responsible of it. Now, the SDG 12 have been calling for a 10 years framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production. This framework has been actually signed in 2012 during the Rio Convention and signed by 193 countries. And this reflects a global consensus on the need for change in order to achieve socio-economic development within planetary boundary. We will see later what all this means. But in 2015, as we know, the 2030 Agenda named the 10 years framework as the implementation mechanism for SDG 12, which focus mainly on the improvement of resources efficiency in consumption and production, as well as decoupling economic growth from environmental degradation. Now, besides that, the One Planet Network has been established as a global community that implements the 10-year framework and works towards achieving the SDG 12, especially at the level of 140 focal points. What is it? So let's go into the, I would say, soul of it. SDG 12 is considered one of, I would say, among the three overarching objectives, especially along with poverty eradication and management of natural resources, which is essential to actually achieve sustainable development. And this is something just to emphasize the relevance of it. And this is also because we are looking at least this through its target is pushing and leading to understanding and ensuring that actually responsible and sustainable consumption and production patterns and practices, yes, contribute to reduce or even prevent the degradation of the environment. And especially doing by looking at how actually we can actually disconnect in a way economic growth from the use or exploitation or exploitative use of natural resources. In a way, in synthesis, what is it? Is doing more and better with less. Is actually looking at economic growth in a way that it could be done without degrading the environment, but applying an increase of resource efficiency and promotion of sustainable lifestyles. What are the targets of these indicators? So the targets are 8 mentioned, but actually they approach it, in a way, action at different level, at policy level. So they look at how policy should actually promote, contribute to the shift to sustainable practice. But it's also looking at how, for instance, we, by certain deadline, in this case, it's mentioned 2030, can achieve much better use and management of natural resources, especially having a look at materials footprint, but also specifically looking at how we can curb and reduce the global food waste, especially today, which is actually we are facing enormous challenges when we talk about food security. And then we look at also specific type of waste, like for instance, hazardous waste, that by 2020, and imagine we already overpassed this deadline, we should actually have managed to achieve a much more sound management of these chemicals. But unfortunately, we will see that we didn't actually achieve this target. By 2030, another is to reduce in general waste, and especially through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse, but also inducing, in a way, encouraging, and it's becoming more and more almost enforcing corporation to actually integrate sustainability and CSR information in their reporting. And as you know, for instance, in Europe, since already 2-3 years, the GRI has become actually mandatory. It's not anymore voluntary. And there is a growing, I would say, claim and request of really making all sort of reporting, looking from ESG, from GRI, or for other type of similar reporting, actually mandatory. And then it's looking at how to promote actually public procurement practices, which are much more conscious and responsible of actually the implication and the potential impact of unsustainable consumption and production. And then it's looking at, in specific, at the role and the connection, and I would say cooperation, that should be established between developed and developing countries, or least developing countries, where no matter countries that are in a way in a better position to address pattern of sustainable consumption and production, can also help those countries that in a way have not the same capacity or facility to do so, to actually enjoy of a more open cooperation where there is a sound technological transfer, especially when looking at the decarbonization strategy and approaches by facilitating the installation of renewable energy capacity and other important approaches. But it's also looking at specific sector like tourism, that, as we know, tourism is for many countries, especially including Costa Rica, one of the major economic revenue of the country. But we are learning more and more, especially in Europe, that if this tourism is not addressed in a responsible, sustainable way, while actually putting emphasis on the local culture, local production, and local labor market, all the revenue, economic revenue, would be totally, in a way, removed or offset by negative impact, either on the economy, the society, and the environment. And then the last, which is going to be one of the hot topics in COP28, especially here in Dubai, would be the discussion around actually taking drastic measure in rationalizing the inefficient use of fossil fuel subsidies, which are still persistent everywhere, and which in a way undermine the transition to renewable energy or decarbonization strategy, and overall distort the markets. Now, what is the challenge per se? The challenge is that we have reached more than 8 million people. We have actually a growing middle class, which is actually demanding more and more products and services, and of course is putting more and more pressure on natural resources. And if we look at the planetary boundary that has been defined and established by the Stockholm Resilience Center, we can see that from 2009 to 2023, we have actually gone over and beyond what is called the green zone or safe operating zone. So what does it mean? It means that crossing these boundaries increase the risk of generating large-scale, abrupt, or reversible environmental change. These boundaries have been actually designed in order to not only focus on climate change, but also looking at the interrelated processes within complex biophysical Earth system, which means that, again, focusing only on climate change is not sufficient for increased sustainability. And if we look in details, we see that novel entity, just to mention one of the 6 which have been already reaching the red zone, the risky zone, are related to environmental pollutants, especially with the special reference to plastics and nuclear waste, but also reflect the in a way, how this interconnected, of course, to the rest. So for instance, another connection can be made to the land changes system, especially in relation to pollution, contamination of soil, of air, but also in relation to the related impacts to what we are facing in terms of ocean waste pollution. And then if we look at, for instance, climate change, obviously is clear, is measured in relation to the CO2 and gas emission, but also on the radiative forcing, which is the level of radiation that is entering Earth rather than leaving Earth. Now, something important to say about these boundaries is that have been related to the effect and impact of human activities. And it's sad to say, because if we look also at the other elements, like for instance, the biosphere integrity, we are really looking at issue about biodiversity loss and extinction of species that I'm sure you're aware is actually increasing time to time. So the impact, and that is going on, what have been analyzing more in details in terms of data, what has been the impact of unsustainable or irresponsible production and consumption, has been that even though we achieve a growth, an economic growth of an increase of factor of 5 in the past 50 years, we also have been producing a factor of 2.5 of food, an amount of 2 in relation to water, fresh water especially, but also an amount of factor 3 of timber, which has been logged legally and illegally, unfortunately, to produce pulps and paper. This means that the planet will need more than 180 billion tons of material every year till 2050. What does it mean in visual terms is that by 2050, we're going to have, or need actually, 3 planets to supply the required resources and material to satisfy our demand. So in essence, what currently we are using much more resources that our planet can produce in a given time. And obviously the essence here, or the lesson, is that we need actually to reduce the amount of waste we generate and the amount of material and resources we extract. And take into account that, again, looking at facts and data, we are looking at 1/3 of all food produced is actually wasted. And only 3% of available water is fresh, and only if 30% of global electricity is generated by renewable sources. Without talking about plastic. And that's especially one topic is very close to my heart, because in Vietnam, I was very much involved in raising awareness on the impacts of plastic waste. And I set up with my colleagues, other 4 friends, in the Netherlands. And this,
Nika, sorry,
yes,
we
sorry.
lost you for a little bit. So you were saying
Oh,
about
sorry.
Vietnam, you were working with your colleagues?
Yes, so with 4 of my friends, we set up this organization called Rethink Plastic Vietnam, and now it became a foundation in the Netherlands. And our objective was at that time to raise awareness on plastic waste. And we did through seminar, workshop, seminar, but also cleanup activity, engaging with students at university, at school level. And this also brought the attention, and especially the political attention on the matter. And I would say that, proudly say that, we are still very active. And I think we reach a kind of general commitment, a community, but also political and corporate level, to really address the problem of plastic waste in Vietnam, which is dramatic, as you know, because Vietnam still is considered one of the 5 countries that actually generate more ocean waste or plastic waste. And it's dramatic because if we look at data again, we are producing every year more than 300 million tons of plastic, and which is actually asking for 7 million oil barrels per year. So that's also related to the fact that when we talk about decarbonization, fossil fuel use, and so on, we should also relate that consideration to plastic, because most of actually high increasing percentage of oil is not only used for energy, but is also used for producing plastic. And this more than 60% of this plastic that is produced, unfortunately, is not retained in the economy or reused, but it actually ends up in the environment, if not to say in the ocean. And one of the most problematic is, of course, single-use plastic, very much actually deriving by packaging. This is also some data to understand and show you the different proportion of source of waste. And if you can see, is very much on food. So we are, this is latest data, but I'm sure Casey would explore more on this topic. But food waste is one of the major issues, followed by paper, cardboard, plastic, glass, and metals. And if you look also at forecast, we are not seeing a prosperous scenario, because it's actually is going, especially in emerging economy, waste is just going to increase exponentially. So there are different factors. We should need another webinar to talk about waste and waste management. But I want to relate to one factor, like, for instance, COVID now, and how sometimes I would say often is complex. Try to find a good balance between, for instance, socioeconomic, environmental sustainability, and creating, while responding to emergency like this health emergency, which is COVID, we also affect and create negative impact, for instance, on the environment. Imagine that because of COVID and because of the vast production of material, especially plastic material, masks, gloves, apron, bottles of sanitizer, just to mention few, we have, of course, saved a lot of lives, and we have to be absolutely grateful for that. But at the same time, we have increased the production of plastic of 40%. And not only that, COVID has pushed us to enjoy what is online shopping and home delivery, which unfortunately has a huge price on the environment. And this is especially in relation to emission, because of logistics, transportation, processing, congestion, but also because of the increased amount of packaging and plastic packaging that is used for especially the delivery of food. Something else which is shocking is the latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which tell us and confirm that actually human activity are the main cause of global warming. There was a very vivid discussion and debate on this issue. But this report, I think, explain and in a way confirm or assess that human activity, because of unsustainable energy use, land use and land use change, lifestyle, patterns of consumption and production, actually has been the major cause of climate change, global warming, especially in the last decades. And the graph on the right show us also the major activity or in terms of CO2 emission, especially from fossil fuel combustion, flaring, cement, forestry, and other land use. Where do we stand today? If we look especially in relation to climate change, green gas emissions continue unabated. Green gas emissions are not counterbalanced by removal, and the world, unfortunately, is not yet prepared to complete the net zero transition. Now, achieving economic growth and sustainable development require fundamentally that we actually reduce our ecological footprint. An ecological footprint very much look at what is our impact, and could be from individual to society to collective action in relation to the use of our resources. So in this graph, you can see how, for instance, the use of urban, forest, energy, grazing, crop is actually affecting overall the system of production and consumption. I would like to stop here with this exercise. I'm sure that a lot of you already done it, and actually let me know if you already did it or not. But it's kind of, I think, it's a quite quick exercise of less than 3 minutes, I think, which will give us an idea of what is actually our footprint. Would you like to do it?
Yes. So we just put our
try. I
cell
hope the
phones
barcode
close.
is working. Please
Yes,
try.
I already tried. I mean, I already, it worked. The QR code worked.
You did. Okay.
Let's see. Take the first step.
While doing the exercise, try to be the most honest possible. Did you finish?
Well, I'm still, but
Still
maybe
doing.
you can but some people have it, like Amanda has. So maybe you can continue. And we'll.
So what would be nice
you.
is that whatever I can continue, but in the meantime, when you finish, just put the results on the chat, and then we can compare.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, because what is nice is to understand also how actually is looking at our individual responsibility. So, oh, Amanda, only 2.9 Earth, but you live in Costa Rica, I suppose. Irma in the Netherlands, 4. It's fascinating to see also relate to the context. So for instance, if I do in Dubai, unfortunately, I'm not proud to share my results, but because of the impossibility here, certain, I would say, the mobility itself. So here it's very difficult, unfortunately, to use public transport for several reasons. So already that would put my score very low. Ecologico, Ariella, 6.9. Okay. 3, La Alicia, okay. But okay, but what is interesting?
I wanted to be 1. How can I come?
One,
we need to learn how can we get to 1, huh?
Absolutely. But at least this is a very simple exercise, but gives an idea of which eventually variable indicators we can influence, because we could. Only if you think about mobility and car pooling, sharing, already that will reduce a lot your footprint. So there are simple tricks that can guide us to be a bit more responsible. Okay, let's continue. So let's now look at the other side. So what can we do to contribute to SDG 12? So we heard, unfortunately, the bad news and how society is actually not, I would say, in the right track. And we have to find ways to reverse these current trends, and especially very much looking at change, production, and consumption. Now, let's look at production to start with, and responsible production. So this is call for producers. So why not start with thinking what we actually produce? And this is by starting by assessing ecological and carbon footprint from sourcing to end of life. So it's a bit, in technical terms, trying to apply everywhere an LCA, but also integrating socioeconomic aspects of it. But it's also redesigning products. So if you think, you look at any product we are using, from home to office and so on, these are always complex, I would say, elements combined and made of multiple layers of material and resources. And sometimes you really ask and wonder why certain products, especially packaging, are designed in this way. Imagine when you go to the supermarket also, you go to buy not a perishable product, but it's still packed with 3-4 layers of plastic. And then you ask why? What is the need for this? So this is our consideration where company can already have an amazing positive impact while reducing the carbon footprint. And then, of course, is investing in R&D, research and development, looking for better way we can use strategically our resources, but also how we can produce and manufacture our goods and use our material. And finally, is looking for new business model. Now, I'm here in Dubai, actually proudly teaching a course on circular economy, and I'm really getting fascinated by it. More and more I study it, because I do see how these teaching it is really help to actually shift your mindset in looking and thinking much more systemically in a way that we actually, first of all, understand the value of waste and all the material we actually discard in the environment with absolutely no reason, but also the way of how creativity and innovation can play an important role in order to actually make and retain and recapture the value of resources and material we are using. So in a way, I'm becoming an advocate of zero waste whenever, however is possible, because looking from an economic perspective, because waste is loss, and it's loss of material, loss of money, loss of investment. So it's also from a business, again, perspective, finding creative way to recapture this value. And I think businesses, luckily, and big corporations are understanding why it's very important and is becoming more and more important and relevant, really understanding and changing from what we call a linear method of production to a more circular. First of all, because the demand of natural and for natural resources are just growing. And even when we look at decarbonization strategy, transition to renewable energy, we do see that the pressure on new mineral, new resources that we are putting on actually limited sites is growing. And it would be, unfortunately, and we can see already in a lot of situations, there is going to be a sort of, unfortunately, let's call it conflict or run for resources, and making sure that, you know, those company or few company or government can access and control this type of sources. Now, the extraction and processing of this material, because of the use of fuel, are actually contributing highly to greenhouse gas emission, biodiversity loss, and water stress. And for the business, important is the cost, and increasing cost to access these resources that is becoming much, much more impactful on actually the supply chain and final cost of the products. But fundamentally, it's a society. Likely, I think we are raising awareness. There is much wider consciousness on the need to change. And especially I welcome, you know, the Generation Z, the new generation, my students, who are going to be the future leader, who are finally understanding the need to change, the need to become a bit more responsible and sustainable. And this, I think, is a hope. And I do see proudly how, especially my students, but also, you know, the young generation is really understanding and striving with amazing creative idea on try to change and address sustainability challenge. But then it becomes the role of us consumers, citizens. So if we consider that we, especially, have a sort, as the old economists would say, the power is in the hands of the consumers, we lost a bit that concept. But if we think that as collective, our purchasing power and behavior actually they can determine how producer or what they produce and how they produce, and how and if they have to adopt certain CSR principle, we have the power to change. Because if we believe that demands in a way influence supply, and if at the moment that we start refusing certain products, services, or application that we don't consider helpful or healthy, or we consider damaging, if we start rethinking how we consume, we actually reflect on what we really need instead of what we want. But also we start in pushing for buying sustainable products for which we know the sources, which especially we can actually trace them and track them. And if we, because of this attitude, we become a role model for our family, for our community and friends, I think we together can change and push for great change. And this is what, in a way, UPeace as an organization institution is trying to do, is trying to actually shape responsibly the new leaders. And how we do it? We do it, of course, through education, master, doctoral level, through our 3 major departments, which is related to peace and conflict study, environment and development, and international law, but also is through, like this venue, raising awareness on specific subject and topics with seminar, conferences, workshop, with a doc training program, but I think the most valuable with very close collaboration and cooperation with other organizations and university all over the world. But specifically, and this is the program Alicia was referring to, I think SDG 12 per se, in its essence, is covered and mainstream, I think, in all the courses of the program of responsible management and sustainable economic development, which have been actually launched in 2009, and which I was very happy to be one of the co-designer of it. And why is important? Because this program at the end, first of all, emphasizes the economic and management perspective of peace. It also explain and prepare a future leader in understanding the importance of their role in society at individual and collective level. It's also enhance not only critical but also systemic thinking to deal and to understand and to address sustainability challenges, which are becoming more and more complex. But also it highlights the role, the division of roles and responsibility between the different sectors in society, as well as helping and teaching students how to assess the impacts of organization, decision, and action on the impact of the decision and action on the local economy, the environment, and the overall society. But I would say most importantly is it keeps with a lot of theory, practices, and experiences, students with the knowledge, I would say, and skills of becoming visionary and transformative leaders. So my last talk, because I talk too much, is, and this is a message from myself, I say, overall, don't be afraid to be insignificant, especially when you think, oh, even if I change, nothing will change. Or even if I change my consumption habit, I would try to be more sustainable in my lifestyle, that would not matter. I don't think so, because I believe that any small action have multiplier contagious effects. Be courageous and show that you care. That is a message for you all. And thank you very much for being my audience today, and looking forward to have question and address question, clarification, or sharing idea, and especially looking forward to future collaboration and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nika.
I hope I was not too long. I tried to concise the information, but it's very difficult okay, because it's a huge topic. I try to be.
It's a huge topic. You're right. I think.
Any questions?
Yeah, if someone wants, I know that Irma. So Irma is here. Irma is actually in the Netherlands. she's it's good because she was a UP student, but she was also from their charter network, so she's a bridge. Irma, do you want to say something, Irma, about your question there? If you open your mic, we cannot hear
the mic.
you. Mm-hmm.
I think I already did. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your presentation first. Of course, I already knew a lot of the numbers, but it's still shocking if you just have them in your face like this, right? And
Sorry.
I'm also no. It's good to we have to be aware of those things. And I'm always struggling with those numbers, like we've grown 5 times our economy, all the materials that we're needing. That in the Agenda 2030, it still mentions economic growth. Instead of, for most of the Western world, degrowth. So how do you, I'm always wondering, how do people deal with that? If we are addressing the SDGs, but also taking into account the full Agenda 2030, then for me, there's sort of a conflict.
Yes, I do agree with you. There is a sort of conflict. It's a very complex question, I think. It's very difficult also to address in a few minutes.
Okay.
And that's why I think SDG 12, in a way, try to push the concept of revisiting and change. That's why I was reviewing a lot of reports related to SDG 12, and there is the insistence of radical change, transformational change. Now, what I feel is we are missing out the value of change. And even if you look at the 10-year framework, it's not very explicit how and what we should do to really become more sustainable and responsible. And in fact, if you look at now, now we only talk, especially here in the region, is COP28, is decarbonization, is net zero strategy, is transition. This is the only focus, which I think very complex and is deviating and even quite dangerous because we miss out other fundamental sustainability challenges. Especially here in the region, we were talking about water stress. So water is not part of the question anymore. Food security likely had become part of the question now, but just put like as an appendix. And then again, what I miss out strongly is this sense of responsibility. You are totally forgetting that. So now it's an issue thanks to ESG reporting. It seems that now the corporate world finally, it became the co-responsible of taking action to address sustainability challenges. But let's be honest, it's not enough. And unfortunately, it's not always so transparent and coherent. So and economic growth, it's a big issue because, okay, I think the West, let's put like this, I don't like this, putting this anachronism, but okay, Western worlds or developed advanced society, we have lived our economic growth. Actually, there are some of our economy now facing the challenge of stabilization, if not the growth. But then when you look at the other countries, the other side, especially looking at emerging economies, still developing countries, how can we deny them the same level of development, economic development, that we enjoyed? So the only way out, and I understand a bit maybe the rationale of these SDGs, is to say, yes, okay, we still accept economic growth, but be aware that that's to be sustainable, has to be responsible, etc., 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 by implementing certain action and eventually achieving certain targets. How?
Thank you.
We lost her.
Yeah, we lost her, right? Okay. Sometimes I don't know if it's me. Oh,
Yeah.
Nika, we lost you for some seconds. Nika.
But yeah, but thank
But
you.
think-
Yeah, thank you for your thoughts about this. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Earth Charter is of importance, because it does talk about universal responsibility.
Absolutely.
And it does talk about, it looks at a way more systemic approach, connecting all the dots instead of having
Correct.
all these different goals separately. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you to you. Thank you.
I see in the chat Saba Momani. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correct, but it's something similar actually of what you were just saying, and it's actually asking if what's the balance between economic growth and societies to to achieve a poverty reduction. So is it feasible? I don't know, Saba, if you are there. And you can read it here in the chat, Nika.
Okay.
And I think it's what you were just saying, is that of course is a dilemma, because sometimes we are. Well, I think it's what you were saying at the beginning. It's like sometimes couple, or we think that to get economic growth and get all this comfort, we need to deplete natural resources. But I think now we need a new mindset. It's like, how can we have all these benefits?
I think mindset shift for sure, but also is looking very, I would say, proactively to new business model. So
Yes.
I do believe in circular economy as it all, but again, it's not only circular economy, it's performance economy, is actually looking at sufficiency economy, which is a new terminology now, and adapt it. So we are everywhere now. It's becoming, for me, it looks like a nice, cute exercise that give us the excuse and justification to say, we are doing something to address, the challenges we are facing. We have to be more honest and more radical in change and for change. Now, the problem is, again, how we play in the level field, first of all, and how we can also balance out the different interests and agenda of different stakeholders. And if you see today, we are facing enormous challenges. So not only the war in Ukraine, but now the recent conflict in Palestine, and more they will come. And they will come especially for the conflict on over resources, especially water. Everybody's saying that, and it's coming. So what are we doing to prevent that? And if we look from the financial point of view, and we look at investment that is needed for instance, decarbonization, we are talking about trillions of US dollars. Where are they coming from? Who is committing for that? Where are the pledges? When it will become concrete action? Actually, I'm looking forward for COP28, because that is going to be a very critical point on the lost and damaged fund. Let's see who is actually which country will be the one, so institution, to be courageous enough to really commit and disburse money for accelerating something that otherwise will be really disastrous for everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Nika. Well, there was other question. Hannah.
Any other questions?
Hannah Fox is there. We do have to move, but I think it was interesting, and I think what Hannah is saying, it will connect with now what we're going to share, especially my colleague Amanda Bennett on the Earth Charter. But she's asking if there's anything in the SDG about the philosophical question of what is enough. I maybe you can say something. I haven't seen that
enough.
there,
That's fantastic.
but it's enough. But
what is enough? And I think that goes back to our individual responsibility. If we start saying, and then I tell to especially my family, when you go shopping, even for food, and starting asking yourself, do I really need it? Or If I need it, would I, in case of food, consume it responsibly? But especially when you go shopping, come on, let's be honest. So how can we be consciously, in a way, and coherent with our value and principle and put in action, and not be afraid to say no, or what other will think about my strange behavior? And this is, I always invite my students, don't be afraid. And especially in Vietnam, we did a lot of exercising with my students. We would go to bars, restaurants, and I would invite them to say, whenever they offer you whatever you order, a coffee or a mug, and it's in plastic, single-use plastic, just say no. Say no, thank you. And we did that, and the impact was impressive. And I'm doing this now here in Dubai. They look me a crazy lady. But on the other side, I also get the opportunity to discuss, because of course the immediate reaction is that, why not? Like, are you stupid or what, that you don't accept, a coffee in a plastic cup? But then I have the advantage to say, why not? And then they get my lecture for free. But guess what? After few days I meet them again, they would welcome and they say, Madam, come. Here is your coffee with eventually a glass cup or porcelain cup, which according to LCA is not necessarily better than plastic, but okay, let's leave the technical stuff for another discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Nika. Well, Gabriela Alarcon was also asking about, but I think this was a difficult question. Maybe what we can do is to share tips here in the chat. Everybody can share, because it's how can we differentiate from a product or company that's sustainable and greenwashing? And probably this is context, but this is maybe bit context specific now, no? Or is it, what do you think?
No, unfortunately, okay, but that goes back to one of the slides of my presentation is now, and it's part of the framework, the 10-year framework, is actually inviting company to be more transparent, especially in disclosing information. So for me, disclosure of information, especially in relation to environmental impact, but also socioeconomic, it has to become mandatory, no matter. So we as consumer, we should request, and actually our policymaker, to know where each product comes from, what is the supply chain, be able to trace and track everything. Now, with R&D, blockchain, artificial intelligence, we should be able to do that. So why not? I think it's our right. And I think starting from that, this question, this greenwashing, and now there is another word, carbon washing, can be addressed very easily if there is the will.
And it's good as well to be part of groups, maybe communities, networks.
Absolutely.
Because then you share information. I mean, I live here in Costa Rica, so maybe I can share, okay, with Gabi, with Amanda, Ariela, who's here, with like, oh, I found this, and they're actually quite responsible. I learned about it. So actually those type of networks, and it's also generate community in a sense, so we can
absolutely
not think that we are alone on this
journey. Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much, Nika.
Thank you so much, and hope to keep in contact for any further discussion, or maybe collaboration, or setting up new initiative on around SDG 12. Very welcome. Bye bye. I will have to escape in a few minutes because, as you know, different timing, other commitments.
You are very late. It's very late
now. No, it's okay. It's okay.
There, but it's fine.
Thank you. Bye bye.
No, and if any of you are interested in, a master's program.
Yes, and I invite everybody because I think Ramsed, and in collaboration, of course, with our charter and other departments, we are really pushing forwards to this type of shift and change. So, for instance, a lot of courses are introducing also new business model, new approaches for consumption and production. And actually, we also invite students to put in practice. So for instance, my course on social responsibility, I always try to teach theory, but then immediately apply in practice in cooperation with often corporation. So that's type of iteration and retro feedback collaboration, it's amazing. And students learn a lot. And then luckily, I have to say, it's especially to my Ramsed students, everywhere they go, they really have significant impact. I'm very proud of them. So thank you so much. I will add my email for anyone who would like to continue the conversation. Thank you so much and enjoy the workshop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, it's good to know Janet Ripardo. She was one of your MBA students.
Yes,
so that's great.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so you have the information there of UPeace as well if you want to join and get the master's or the doctoral program. And now I want to introduce Amanda Bennett, the program manager and youth coordinator at EarthCharter International. So we're going to learn about as well the EarthCharter, and I think this is going to be a part we heard from Nika a lot about the systemic situation, about what is happening in terms of sustainability, on sustainability patterns of production and consumption. And with the EarthCharter, and Amanda will learn a little bit about as well the sustainable lifestyles. What does it mean in the through the perspective of the EarthCharter? And also appealing to the promotion of values and ethical principles that can lead us to our choices, personal choices in terms of reducing our ecological footprint, because now I would really I need to check more how can I reduce that. Okay, Amanda, if you want to, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alicia. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, for being here. Thank you, Dr. Nika Salvetti, for that wonderful introduction to SDG 12. If it was new to some of you, especially that deep dive into the targets and indicators, and then seeing the systemic vision of how we're part of a system of systems, especially in how our decisions every day impact the way we consume and the way that we produce as well. So when planning this workshop, we really wanted to give you a different perspectives. So I am here today as part of EarthCharter International, and I will tell you very briefly about the EarthCharter, so you can go and explore it more on your own time. You can also check out our website at earthcharter.org. If you speak Spanish or Portuguese, you can also find a lot of these materials in different languages. So the EarthCharter in Spanish, for example, is Carta de la Tierra. But basically, the EarthCharter is this document with 16 principles powering a global movement. And it can be applied by anyone at the individual level or in the private sector, definitely in education as well. We'll talk about, Alicia will tell us more about that later. And there, if you learn more about the EarthCharter movement and go to our website, you will see how people in all different sectors are using it, and you can get inspired as well. The history of the EarthCharter can be even traced back to that report from 1987 that Mr. Omar Hernandez mentioned earlier today. Some people refer to it as the Brundtland Report, officially called Our Common Future. And this is a report that gave us a definition for sustainability that we're still using, that emphasized for sustainability and the responsibility to think about future generations as well. And this report also called for it called for a charter that brought together perspectives from all around the world and brought together those values and that motivation that we need to contribute to that, to really put that responsibility that we have into action, in collective action. So the EarthCharter is divided into 4 pillars. We won't go into every principle today, but since we're focusing on SDG 12, I will explain. We will talk about a few pillars and also a special part from the preamble that really aligns with sustainable lifestyles. And these pillars have 4 principles each, which are interconnected. And as you can see from the pillars, they're also very interconnected. So we start with pillar 1 with respect and care for the community of life. And then we branch out into ecological integrity, social and economic justice, democracy, nonviolence, and peace. And as I mentioned, each of these pillars has 4 principles, with each having sub-principles. So there's a lot to study when you read the Earth Charter. There's a lot to reflect on. There's a lot of connections to be made. And we really hope that if this document is new to you and this global movement, that you will be inspired to learn a little bit more. We have a podcast, we have publications, we have courses, so many resources that you can check out today or tomorrow, and to help you with this responsibility that we're talking about today, especially linked to SDG 12. So Dr. Salvetti already gave us an overview of SDG 12. I wanted to share this infographic from a UN report published this year and highlight the fact that we're in the year 2023, which means we're halfway through the 2030 agenda, which means we're at the halftime mark. The other day in one of the courses we were talking about, we were making this analogy that I found through another UN resource. So like in the growing up in the United States, I would go to American college football matches, and growing up in Costa Rica as well, I have dual citizenship. I would watch the World Cup with my family, and just thinking about how we're halfway there, how at halftime, you think about, okay, we have half of the game left. What's going to happen? Anything could happen. So we really have to think about our responsibility as part of these generations that are living now. And what are we going to do for the next 7 years to achieve as much as we can from these sustainable development goals? So as you can see, there are still a lot of problems. We talked about them with Nika. And there are also some successes. So we really can't feel paralyzed right now. We really have to feed this moral compass that we have and this responsibility and move forward by creating and building more and more ways of collaborating and partnerships and through education. And we've talked about this already with Dr. Salvetti, but yeah, there's a rebound effect. So even though we have these technological advances that have made things more efficient, that have made them cheaper, that have given us progress, it has also made it easier for us to consume more. So cars used to be more expensive. So the people who had smaller cars before can now afford bigger cars. The people who didn't have a car before can now afford smaller cars. And we're really struggling. This is just one example. So cars, we also have so much technology around us now. Children can have cell phones. Imagine if you're I don't know, in your 50s or your 40s or your 30s like me, imagine what your life would have been like if you had had a cell phone at the age of 12. So things are really changing. And as we mentioned, we have to think about the decisions we make every day, and the decisions that we make when we're buying something, when we're voting for elections, really have to consider this consumption that we're taking part of, and the natural resources and the human resources that we're exploiting when we're contributing to these markets. So going back to the Earth Charter, there are many connections that we can make between the Earth Charter and the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we're focusing on Sustainable Development Goal 12 on responsible consumption and production. So I wanted to share 2 principles that relate to this goal, and then we'll share another part of the Earth Charter that will give us some food for thought and for discussion, because we also want to hear from you in some breakout rooms in a few minutes. So we have principle 2, which reminds us from pillar 1, which reminds us to care for the community of life with understanding, compassion, and love. And of course, you can reflect on how this can be applied. we have to think about how this community of life not only includes us humans, not only includes our neighbors in other countries or our fellow humans in other regions of the world, but it also includes the rest of the community of life, which other species and so other species, other forms of life that are also part and that are also going to inherit this world. And we also have Earth Charter Principle 12, which is from Pillar 2 on ecological integrity, that gives us a little more specific guidance and ties very well with Sustainable Development Goal 12. So this Principle 7, which you can also use if you're an educator or if you're a business leader, it gives us this guide to adopt patterns of production, consumption, and reproduction that safeguard Earth's regenerative capacities, human rights, and community well-being. So as you can tell, this gives you a really systemic perspective of what sustainability is and sustainable lifestyles. And you can read it on your own time, as I mentioned. The Earth Charter is a document for everyone to use and for everyone to help you on your journey of sustainability and inner development as well. And as you read it, you will see a lot of parallels with SDG 12. We already went through the targets with Dr. Salvetti, and I can just highlight some of these key themes in Principle 7. So reduce, reuse, recycle, which we've been working towards a lot. Act with restraint and efficiency when using energy. Promote the development, adoption, and equitable transfer of environmentally sound technologies. Internalize the full environmental and social costs. So we're also thinking about fellow humans of the goods and services in the selling price, enable consumers to identify products that meet the highest social and environmental standards. So we've had those questions come up today. How do we know what is greenwashing? How do we deal with these tough questions? And we can tell that this is not something this is something that requires collective action. So this is something that requires partnerships within the private sector, with individuals, with governments. And we can see this in the systemic perspective that it is outlined in this principle. There's also the sub-principle to ensure universal access to healthcare that fosters reproductive health and responsible reproduction. And of course, this key theme of adopting lifestyles that emphasize the quality of life and material sufficiency in a finite world. So we looked at those images of the planetary boundaries. It's always shocking to see just how big this rebound effect is, especially when we think back to Dr. Salvetti's presentation and seeing our progress throughout the years and the difference between the way we have crossed many planetary boundaries now compared to 20 years ago, compared to 30 years ago. And these are facts that we need to really consider when making our decisions every day. So lastly, I wanted to share with you a paragraph from the Earth Charter. So we looked at two principles that can be directly applied to SDG 12. And we also wanted to share today a paragraph from the preamble. So from the first part of the Earth Charter, that when you read it, you can go back and reflect on this as well. And I wanted to share this paragraph, which the Earth Charter, as I mentioned, we can trace it back to its origins to the late 80s. And it began to be drafted in the 90s. And the final document was launched in the year 2000 after many global consultations, after many people, children, women, people from indigenous community, people from all regions of the world contributed to this document. So even though this might read like it was written yesterday or today, this is something that we've been pondering for a long time, for over almost 30 years. So I wanted to read this paragraph today. And then in our breakout rooms, we will discuss a little more this part that I have highlighted in the coral color. So the choice is ours. Form a global partnership to care for Earth and one another, or risk the destruction of ourselves and the diversity of life. Fundamental changes are needed in our values, institutions, and ways of living. We must realize that when basic needs have been met, human development is primarily about being more, not having more. We have the knowledge and the technology to provide for all and to reduce our impacts on the environment. The emergence of a global civil society is creating new opportunities to build a democratic and humane world. Our environmental, economic, political, social, and spiritual challenges are interconnected, and together we can forge inclusive solutions. So this part, which was already mentioned in the chat by Irma, our friend Irma Verhoeven. So this gives us a very, very basic definition of sustainable lifestyles that, well, not basic, because we can reflect on it and expand on it from our context. And that's why we want to give you this short breakout room, 10 minutes, so that you can connect with someone joining us here today. We have a very interesting group. So let's connect and see, what does this mean to you? How does this inform your idea of sustainable lifestyles? And what would you like to share after, now that we're halfway through the, let's say we're halfway through the workshop as well, what would you like to share as you've been reflecting on the situation today, on the advances that we have made, on your individual contributions, but also our collective contributions to SDG 12 and into the bigger goals of achieving a more just, sustainable, and peaceful world. So what does that mean? When we must realize that when basic needs have been met, human development is primarily about being more, not having more. Okay, so we will go into breakout rooms now for 10 minutes just to discuss these key themes, this big idea of sustainable lifestyles. And we will come back in 10 minutes to share our reflections as well with the plenary group. And please remember that we still have one more presentation after. We have one other activity and one more presentation, which will be very interesting for the workshop today. So yeah, so have fun in these next 10 minutes, connecting with someone, and we'll see you again in 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So you have now the option to join the group. So hopefully you can join. Gabby and Amanda as well, if you can join wherever you feel it's good. For these minutes, we can pause the recording.
Welcome back, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. We saw some active groups. So thank you so much for still being here and also for participating. Would anyone like to share any reflections from your groups?
Anna, would you like? I like what you said. And Oli, right?
Well, I mentioned about how I think our education system needs a major overhaul. In some countries, like I mentioned in Brazil, philosophy and sociology are required courses for high school students. And I think things like that would be a much better thing to do than some of the things that we're currently doing. You know, I know education systems are universal, but I think we need to have everyone, and especially children, starting to think more about things like that question of what is it to be more instead of to have more. I think that should be one of our priorities.
We were just saying obviously I'm from FEE with eco schools, and it would be a great activity to actually do with all of our eco school students, get them to think about what actually do they have and why do they need more. And it would be a good resource and challenge for them to do for the Eco Schools Green Flag as well. I think it's a really interesting idea, a great way to embed in the curriculum, like Hannah was saying.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, so we'll continue. I think we are in a bit of the tight schedule. sorry, we lost some of the people from the audience, but this is recording, and I think many people were said that they registered to get the recording. So this is an important a message to that people can and will benefit after this. And so the Earth Charter, so we heard from Amanda. I'm just gonna share just few thoughts about, because some of you are from an education institution, from a university. So we were saying how important it is, and with Nika as well, with Dr. Nika Salvetti, we're saying that, of course, there are systemic changes that need to happen, but at the education level, it is quite important that more people hear about this, about the interconnections of what is happening with the environmental classes. I think many people are saying like the effects of climate change, plastic pollution, etc., and how this is connected with other aspects, with poverty, with injustices that we see. So the Earth Charter, in that sense, it's an integral framework that can help educators or people to express, to help us raising awareness about the intricacies of all these aspects that are happening, and help us to, when we are trying to find solutions or trying to as well make decisions in our lifestyles, we can have in mind all these different aspects that are part of reality, right? So the Earth Charter is this integral framework that can be a catalyst of an integral transformation process in people. So towards, as I said there, a paradigm of complexity and care. And it can give us a new meaning, because I think what we really mean is a new relationship. We start a relationship that starts with oneself, but it's also the renewed relationship between humans and other life forms. So how are we relating between each other? And I think those values expressed in the Earth Charter can help us to bring new meaning to this. So I'll just go through pretty easily, especially of those of you who are educators. So your charter, you can use it for conscious raising, for critical evaluating the context. So you can, in the different contexts that you are, how can we evaluate what's happening at the community level, national level, and then take it to the global level. Encourage a more biosensitive outlook that is not only human or my interest, my comfort, but the rights of other beings around us that have also, that we share in this. Because actually in the Earth Charter, we don't talk about nature and humans. We talk about the community of life. So we are part of a community of life, that we are with interdependent relations. So what do we do in this world if we don't have bees, for example? What do we do in this world with all those plants that give us oxygen, etc.? So it's just having a more humble, attitude in this world, and see how that all of us have the right to live here, and how do we do that? And ethical reflection and dialogue. So yeah, the Earth Charter, we can see it as a compass, and a compass as well can be used in connection with the SDGs to clarify the philosophical aspects of in the SDGs. And one of the things that we use, there are many pedagogical aspects, but one that I want to highlight, because I think it's very important, is the use of metaphors and stories to learn about sustainable lifestyle. So sometimes this concept can be circular economy, integral view, the complex thinking could be quite difficult for many of us. But when we can bring stories, and in that aspect, and I'll share in the chat, or maybe Amanda can also help me to share this wonderful tool that is there available for everybody, is the Earth Stories collection. So there's this people in Spain, actually the researcher, Grian Kutanda, who's also a writer, a bestseller author. And he said, he put together, he connected stories and legends from different parts of the world, and there are different legends and tales with principles of the Earth Charter. So these tales can help us to clarify, okay, so when I'm talking about respect for the community of life, a story can help us. And actually we remember stories. Sometimes there are stories that we were told when we were kids and we continue to remember. So we're finding that these are fascinating ways to promote what is this sustainable lifestyle, help us to clarify. And because metaphors can help us to connect all those theoretical knowledge, put it more in the ground, and help us to internalize. So anyway, so that's one of the things. And we do have some courses, etc., with the Earth Charter. We're trying to do this in practice. Publications and materials, so we'll try to share in the link, because these are free sources. Amanda already mentioned about the podcast, but we have a magazine, we have plenty of resources that can help you with that, even as well as the Earth Stories collection. Case studies as well, because sometimes we learn from the example of others, so we think that that is quite important to do. And open spaces, so like this class that we're now doing with UPs, but we also have some master classes, webinars all the time that talks about this relationship with sustainability, ethics, education, and this changing mindset, which is something that we are always as well in research processes. How can we promote this changing mindset towards the practice of sustainability without falling into indoctrination, which is very important? And well, next year we're going to have a conference, and I hope some of you can help, can join us as well. It's going to be the topic reimagining education for ecological civilizations. It's going to be in the US. So if some of you are from there, we're happy to have you. Okay, so just a little bit about the Earth Charter. We'll share links with you in a moment. And Gabby, we're going to give you the floor. And then we'll continue with a wonderful, so yeah, please stay, because Casey, I'm really looking forward as well to hear from Casey Harrison, who's here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia and Amanda, for your presentation. I'm going to be short. I'll just show you what I think could be a road to address an issue or a theme in your institution or your organization. For instance, here at UPs, because we are the hubs for SDG 12, we address topics on this objective. But if you think where you work, it's more related another SDG or another topic, you can do it on this. So I'll share my my short slide. And you can also, if you have any ideas on the way, you can let me know, and I can include it. Okay. So I wanted to do the PowerPoint, but I opened the PDF, but it's okay. It's the same. So first thing I think you have to do is to make a team. If it's a big university or organization, to do this only by yourself, it will be a lot. So if you can find co-workers or students who you think might be interested in this, and it will be more easy to work with, and it will also make it more fun to do this work plan you want to do. So the second thing I think you need to do is to define this issue from your institution, or if you want to go bigger from your community, as I was saying, from an SDG or any other you think it's more relevant or important from your workplace. You have to address objectives, make a budget. Sometimes you don't need many, for an activity, you don't need any money, but it's always important to keep it in mind just in case. Make a schedule of activities and justify the needs and the importance of this issue. What do you think you need to make this happen? Obviously, you are not going to resolve this issue, but as Nika was saying, it's small steps that count. So it's another step forward to a good place to be. Then what you need to do is to get the support from your superiors. So try to do something small, like an elevator pitch, take a couple of key points and explain them in an easy and short way to get their attention, and present the work plan you did. Also, to make a work plan, you can do some RAIN ideas, systemic thinking, not the one that Nika was mentioning exactly, but you have the idea and then you see what, okay, this for example, for something easy to cook, pasta. What do I need? I need pasta, I need tomatoes for the sauce, so you put everything more in detail, and the more detailed you do this work plan, the more easier it will be the other steps to make the activities, because you have it all in detail, so you don't have to worry much about when it's time to implement it, to make the activities. So now you got the approval from your superiors, and now it's time to try and take them into action. So you could design a strategy. For instance, here at UPeace, we made a workshop to teach them also about the SDG 12. And one of our co-workers from maintenance, he's in charge of the recycling. And he burst on frustration, saying, "This has been the worst year in UPeace on recycling." So it was very shocking. We decided to do something about it. So at that time, when we make the workshop, we didn't have students. They had already graduated. So the campus was only staff. But we made training by building. I went with my co-worker, teaching bin by bin on each building where the recycling bins are, teaching them how to recycle properly. And it took us like a week doing this. I had planned only 10 minutes by building. It's 5 small buildings, only one floor, so that you can imagine something very big. But there were a lot of questions, and you couldn't think, because people get also very confused, even though it's very well explained and detailed, but it's also confusing. So and later on, we made a contest, a 1-month contest on a recycling. And so every day for a month, my coworkers from maintenance, the ones that collected the recycling, they would evaluate how well we did that day. And then we made a chart with each score, and the one who got more points at the end of the month would get a prize. So it was a team building also activity, and we got a tie at the end, so I had to design other activities to untie them, but it was also fun. So the idea of this is to see how you think in your workplace can be more attractive to everybody, so that you get more participation, and you also get to teach them actually something, because now that it's been like 2 or 3 months from that, I see people correcting others when they see somebody putting something in the trash where it's not supposed to be. And so it's been very interesting to see how it's going after that. And it's also very important at the end that you get feedback from others, because to see how you can improve, how can you apply it in the next activity, and so big things can come out from what others have to say. So that's what I wanted to bring to you. So I hope you can I hope it works for you, and you can apply it also from where you are. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabriela. Yes, it was a good, I think sometimes it is important to as well, build community in terms of getting these changes in lifestyle, as we were saying. So I can say we were part of that contest, and it was, it also brought fun, but a learning opportunity as well. And I think it is important to bring those, because we are integral beings. Sometimes if we're not having fun, and if it's something that is really motivate us in a positive way, probably we're gonna reject the activity. So if we can do that, so I think I congratulate Gabby and the team, because they were able to make a good environment in supporting the best way to manage resources here at the university. So that was very good.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yes, as we've been saying during the workshop, it's the small things that matter. So because you will plant a seed on someone, and it will spread, and then it will spread again. So that's the idea.
Wonderful. Okay, so now we have another important part of this workshop, and with Casey Harrison. Thank you, Casey, for being here. Casey is the Director of Impact and Learning at Nuru International. He will talk more about himself, but I can say that he has been for 14 years experience working at the convergence of agricultural production and sustainability, and that is very important. We saw with Dr. Nika's presentation that food waste is enormous, is very important. It's also something that I'm always worried about. I do something in my house, I do the composting, but I know it's not easy for everybody. So anyway, so the food is so important for us, and so I'm really looking forward to learn from Casey more about his research, his work, and I'm sure it will help us a lot in this quest for more sustainable lifestyles. Thank you, Casey.
No, thanks, Alicia. And thanks everyone else, Amanda and Gabriela, great presentation so far. And I'm really happy to be here. Let me get my screen shared with everybody. go from there. Okay, everybody should be able to see the presentation, I think, at this point. Cool. So yeah, my name is Casey Harrison. I currently work for Neuro International, as Alicia said. And today, part of my presentation is going to be a discussion really focused around responsible production and the work that Neuro does with smallholder farmers, but also how that relates to SDG 12 and interacts and with other SDGs around food security, predominantly SDG 2. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that. This is quickly what I'm going to run through today, just so everyone has sort of an awareness of the flow of the presentation. I'm not going to read it, but I just wanted to make sure we started there. So a little bit more on my professional background. Prior to the last 7 years, where I've been working with Neuro International, I worked at World Wildlife Fund, where I spent a lot more time engaging with companies and multinational food and beverage companies, discussing sustainable agricultural production, and discussing sustainable sourcing through their supply chains and the risks that are associated with that. I'm not going to speak as much about that work today, but it definitely has come to shape my understanding of the trade-offs, but also the co-benefits and opportunities of integration between the Sustainable Development Goals and practice. At this time, I also work as the Agricultural Technology Working Group lead for an entity called EMEA. And these are all hyperlinks. So this presentation, I'm happy to have it shared at the end with all the participants, and you can follow up on those yourselves as well. And then the last bit, I'm also a UPeace alumnus. I was here in UPeace from 2012 to 2013. As part of the NRSD program with American University in Washington, D.C. Previously to that, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Zambia, working as an agroforestry extension agent. And I actually grew up on a small farm in northern Baltimore County, Maryland as well. So agriculture and farming has always been something I've been passionate about. The picture on the screen on the right is a trip taken in 2021 to Northeast Nigeria, where we're working with farmers on crop rotations with groundnuts and maize. And then I'll get more into those details in a moment. So a little bit more about where I work. The Neuro Collective was founded in 2008. It's a collection of locally led NGOs with a Neuro International entity registered in the United States. That's a civil society organization, a 501c3 nonprofit that provides support to unique local missions in each country that we operate. So currently, as you can see on the map, we operate in Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Burkina Faso, and we have intentions to scale to other countries in West Africa. Each of these local Neuro NGOs has a unique mission and a unique set of goals and objectives that it plans every year for themselves. My role and my team's role at Neuro International is to provide support in achieving those goals. And that includes everything from support on technical areas in agriculture, economic issues as they relate to rural livelihoods and rural development, as well as monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and fundraising efforts that we do collectively to ensure we can continue that work. There's some commonalities in what each organization does, though. We do focus on working in rural areas. We work specifically with farmers, and we work with farmer organizations or agribusinesses that take the form of cooperatives, which have a dual mission of both generating economic returns for communities and farmers, but also social and environmental returns as well. So why rural development? This slide is a little bit unsettling intentionally. The world right now can be a bit unsettling with all the news and all of the things that earlier Omar had outlined, Dr. Salvetti outlined, as well as the rest of our presenters today. I mean, there are a myriad of shocks that are affecting people and communities all over the world. Doesn't matter if you're rural or urban. But one thing that we have focused in on at Neuro is rural populations because of the level of vulnerability to climate shocks, as well as the historic marginalization that many of these communities have experienced, whether in the developed or the developing world. But what we do know is that 70% of the developing world's poor people are located in rural areas. And so there's a need to target interventions, support, civil society support to those communities. And that's what Neuro aims to do. And there's also in the recent IPCC reports that have been substantiated by EFAD research, gradual shifts in extreme weather and extreme weather events are going to have the greatest impact So climate change will have the greatest impact on rural areas because of the dependence on natural resources that has already been discussed. So sustainable production depends on thriving rural communities. And if we don't have thriving rural communities, we won't have the raw materials we need to then consume in a sustainable way. So the interplay here is very important to consider. So the NURU model, this is a generalization of the stages of work that we implement in partnership with local communities through local really registered NGOs in the countries I already mentioned. This model is intentionally long-term. It usually takes 5 to 7 years before a local NURU NGO is able to then scale from that community to a new community, usually and always defined by local government and governance norms around municipal divisions and government offices, because you have to partner locally, you have to work locally in order to make things happen locally, and end up inspiring the behavior change needed to achieve sustainable production. And even sustainable consumption patterns, because they differ depending on where you live, as we just learned with our footprint calculator, right? And then the way this model generally works is, as I already noted, we work with farmer organizations or cooperative businesses. We help deliver services. We deliver training, coaching, extension services to farmers and their households, healthcare services and training. And then all of this is done in partnership with local, formally registered agribusinesses that take the form of cooperatives. And that cooperative business also receives training and development services so that it is able to then sustain the social, environmental, and economic benefits that the community derives from its existence, because the community is the member, right, in these rural communities. So they are farmers, they're producers, they're the ones who are benefiting from their own hard work and their own agribusiness development. And all of this intends to build resilience to shocks. One thing that I'll note in just a moment is we've already seen backsliding into food insecurity for many communities since the COVID-19 pandemic started, and that's empirical. And the challenge is there, and many of the calls that have come from this reality that we've seen is a need for greater resilience building activities and more sustainable development activities that reach community members and that local communities have buy-in into. And so that's where the NURU sort of mission, vision, values comes from, it was with that intention of building resilience to shocks. I wouldn't be doing justice to this workshop and this presentation if I didn't mention some of our university partnerships as an organization. We partner with the University of Texas, Austin, primarily on an impact evaluation partnership through their Ray Marshall Center for the Study of Human Resources. We also have more informal organizational, but casual personal and professional relationships with the College of William and Mary through one of my colleagues working on satellite imagery and machine learning for impact evaluation and poverty alleviation. And then obviously my role here with Moore University of Peace. I live in Costa Rica with my wife, and we partner here and engage and collaborate with staff in the Environment Development and Peace program. We also, our founder went to Stanford University and received his master's degree from there. And so we have had an ongoing relationship supporting student projects and capstone projects with student researchers. This includes a very recent, interesting research project conducted in Kenya on integrated water resource management in Homa Bay County that has led to informing our programming in that area. And so that's one of these things I'll talk about at the end that I think is very important for us to discuss about how civil society organizations like NURU and our local affiliates and partners can collaborate closely with universities to develop practical research that can be acted on. Just a few things since we're on SDG 12. These are some of the relevant coalitions and affiliations that NURU has. If you haven't heard of them, they're worth considering and just looking into a bit deeper. 1% of the Planet is a corporate social responsibility platform in which 1% of their annual sales goes directly to organizations promoting environmental sustainability. Like NURU, we're registered as a recipient of those types of funds, and many other thousands of other organizations that do great work are as well. And then the Aim for Climate program, which was recently started in 2021 through USG and UAE funding, which intends to drive greater collaboration, research, and funding towards ending global hunger in a climate smart manner. So really improving food systems and sustainable production. And this also concludes the consumption element too, as well, the Aim for Climate program. So briefly, bringing it back to the topic that I was originally trying to integrate with SDG 12 and kind of have that discussion is around food security. And again, we had some really great definitions earlier from Dr. Salvetti, and this is just to ground us in where food security sits as a concept within the Sustainable Development Goals, but also its own definition, right? So as defined by the United Nations Committee on World Food Security, essentially it means all people have access to safe, affordable, nutritious food that meet their needs on a day-to-day basis. And we've been trying to achieve that for many years. More technically, it's measured as through a combination of acute chronic food security, malnourishment versus undernourishment. This is where you end up in more a technical conversation on food security. But the idea for SDG 2 and the sub-targets that are important to NURU's work, but also to broader sustainable production and consumption patterns, is ending hunger and food insecurity by 2030 and ending malnutrition. And what I'll say is we were making great progress towards this goal until COVID-19 and a number of other shocks that are highlighted here on this first slide. We've seen an increase in, and this is data from EMDAT, and this is from the most recent IFPRI, International Food and Policy Research Institute 2023 report on the global state of food security. We've seen an increase overall in extreme weather events, droughts, and floods, which has led to food security backsliding, or more people who are undernourished or malnourished than we have had previously over the last few decades. But also we've seen an increase in instability and conflict. We know the ones that are major, the Ukraine war and the effects that that's had on global food prices and the effects that that's had on input prices for agricultural production, primarily chemical inputs, but that impact short term on households is very significant and can't be ignored when you're trying to consider transitions to regenerative agriculture or sustainable production. And so this is just, this is from ACLID, which is the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. Very interesting project if you're interested in tracking day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month conflict events around the world. I highly recommend this resource. It helps drive our focus and our efforts at honing in and targeting where we should work next as a NURU collective. So what have all of these shocks done that I started off generally at with the beginning, justifying NURU's work, but also what have now increased over the short term? We've seen food security rise. What this graph essentially says is since 2019 and the start of COVID-19, 150 million more people are now undernourished worldwide than were in 2019. So that's a very recent uptick compared to where the trend line you can see here up until 2019, really up until 2018-19, in which we saw a decline in overall global food security, a decline in overall food insecurity, excuse me. And so this is something that we have to address. These shocks require sustainable development, require focusing in on sustainable production that also is able to withstand climate shocks, able to withstand economic shocks, able to withstand conflict shocks as they materialize. And one of the ways that we feel strongly that this can be effective at NURU is by working through farm organizations, by building social cohesion, and by measuring and acting on resilience-based information and indexes. So integrated into action on the SDGs. You know, this has already been touched upon a little by some of the questions during Dr. Salvetti's presentation, but all of these SDGs are integrated and have to work together towards one common vision, right? The 2030 vision. That's what Omar had said at the outset, and that's very important to consider. There are positive co-benefits between these SDG sub-targets and their indicators and the actions associated with them. There are also trade-offs, right? It's not all going to necessarily be positive interaction. I think Dr. Salvetti mentioned COVID-19 in that context, right? We have to ensure people have access to public health opportunities to keep themselves safe and healthy, but then that also increases the amount of plastic that needs to be produced. We have to consider these things in all contexts, right? And so in each context, it's going to be a very different application. For what I'm about to continue to speak about today, I'm really talking about rural contexts in sub-Saharan Africa where we have worked and that experience at NURU. But I think that principle itself has to be applied in all of our considerations and really taking that systems thinking approach that becomes extremely beneficial. So sustainable production and food security, SDG 12 and SDG 2 is zero hunger. NURU's other primary SDG of focus is obviously ending extreme poverty, so SDG 1. being crucial, but today I'm just sort of trying to highlight a few key points because unfortunately you can't talk about all of this in a short presentation without taking too much of all of your time. But the areas where there's overlap in the sub-targets, really thinking about 12.2 and 12.3 for SDG 12 and SDG 2 on Zero Hunger, is really around improving natural resource management at the production point, reducing food wastage, which is really where I'm talking about here, which is in these contexts in which I work and my colleagues work, it's post-harvest loss. It's really helping to prevent the loss and the waste of raw material or seeds that have been produced due to avoidable factors like too much moisture or improper communication on quality of what is needed in terms of what the market is asking for the person who's buying their produce as a farmer. And then lastly, decreasing environmental footprint of production. So increasing intensification, right? Getting more out of smaller plots of land. That's something that smallholder producers for a long time have had extensive knowledge about, whether it's through permaculture principles, integrated agroecology, and or organic production. But that's an area of focus that is very important in the overlap and integration between SDG 2 and SDG 12. And then finally, as has been sort of the theme throughout, all of this requires intentional behavior change. So sustainable production in the NURU model. I would be doing an injustice to one of the world's greatest injustices if I didn't just stop on this slide for a second and talk about how the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change and the impacts of extreme weather, flooding, and drought are also those that contribute the least amount to this factor, right? This dimension, this risk. And so it's very important to consider that point of justice when we're considering how we focus financing at a global level, how we focus funding from the donor community towards these types of activities, and why essentially NURU focuses on adaptation as an organization. We don't focus as much on mitigation. We do aim to mitigate the environmental footprint of our GHG emissions from air travel, which is our primary kind of operational footprint in terms of GHG, or scope 1 or scope 3 emission would be air travel for us as an organization. And there's opportunities to offset those as well, which is another conversation in terms of how you consider responsible consumption and production in terms of GHG emissions. But for NURU, our focus is on adaptation, which essentially is behavior change at its core, as its definition from the IPCC outlines. And it's hard, and it's hard for all of us. And that's why these conversations and examples, none is too small, right? Shifting your behavior around recycling and working within your institution is very important, and right? It's a difficult thing for people to do. And working with farmers who know how to farm, who know how to produce, and asking them to change something that they haven't done before, that requires education. It requires nudging through using a behavioral economics term. It requires an approach that's patient and understanding and empathetic. And that's really at the core of what NURU and our partnership with local communities is trying to do. That's core to our values in terms of how we work. And for me, that's what makes NURU much different than some of the other organizations I've worked at. So NURU's focus on adaptation. There's 5 dimensions of community climate resilience that are embedded in this model that I already discussed with you earlier. There's regenerative agriculture is one of the areas that we focus, and the transition to regenerative agriculture, not an ideological idea that you must do this as best. It's an understanding that transitioning from the production system that is needed at that time in your context to meet your food security needs is as important as the steps you need to take over multiple years to transition to sustainable production. And that type of patience and empathy is really important when you're talking to different stakeholder groups across different industries and different sectors and from different perspectives. And then also we focus on increasing incomes and financial inclusion. We focus on food and nutrition security, which I will talk about in a little bit more detail, some of the actions and activities that we deploy in partnership with communities to improve in this area, measurably improve, which we do measure. I won't be talking so much about measurement and impact today, but if you have questions, I'm happy to talk about those in the Q&A or discussion. And then also on an area of agribusiness professionalism and community-based dialogues. All of these dimensions, as it says at the bottom of this slide, are integrated into curriculum, a training approach that's really intended for adult learning. Anyone over the age of 18, which again, in certain countries can categorize you as youth from the ages of 18 to 35 in some cases. It generally varies slightly by country, but we do target youth. We target women intentionally, which I'll talk about in a moment. And we also target dialogues within communities to ensure that there's both opportunities for peace building, but there's opportunities for understanding the dynamics, especially the gender dynamics that impact food security and the adoption of agricultural practices for sustainable production. Okay, so what does NURU do to support regenerative agriculture? What am I talking about? What are our activities? What are some practical things that we implement in partnership with our local NGO partners? We promote good agricultural practices that measurably, or at least in the literature, and that improve soil and water health. And then we look to evidence that ourselves through evaluation. And we do that in a number of different ways, but some of the practices that are relevant to the semi-arid agroecological regions of West Africa in which we work, in Burkina Faso and Nigeria, as well as some of the semi-arid regions in Kenya where we work, and the mountainous regions in Ethiopia. A number of those contexts, as have been talked about, require a different suite of practices, good agriculture practices that promote soil and water health. And these are some examples of those that we promote: crop rotations, intercropping, agroforestry, tree planting and tree nursery management is embedded in that idea. More trees being planted is better for the world, better for farming, better for land, if done in a specific way that also creates a benefit for the crop that the farmer is dependent upon for their livelihood and their food security, right? So you have to think about it as a system. And then we also talk a lot about the integration of livestock, primarily because manure is extremely valuable to increasing soil organic matter and soil health. All of this is to say, we do this work with an intention of increasing the adoption of climate smart agriculture practices within the communities we serve. And we try and we measure that through surveys and data collection methods on the ground. And then also we're looking over time to measure increases in soil organic matter. I won't get too technical with it, but the point is soil organic matter increases water holding capacity, which then increases resilience to shocks due to drought or flood on farm. And so if there's a huge flood, more water can percolate through, so there's less waterlogging and damage to the crops. If there's less water, there's more ability for basically the molecules within the soil to hold on to that water and grab a hold of it so that it's there for longer periods and crops don't suffer quite as much. The last point is technology plays a key role in all of this, but there's some specific technology services that we leverage and deliver to communities. I'm just going to go to the next slide to make that kind of point more vivid. On the right-hand side of your screen is Ignitia. It's a company out of Europe that has developed a micro weather forecasting model that is targeted to specific weather patterns in specific regions of the world. And so it's not a global model, it's a regional model. And so it helps with increasing the accuracy of weather forecasting. And they've also developed a system to be able to deliver it to farmers on simple feature phones in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, where prevalence of smartphones is not very common. And also with the way we employ this, we ensure that it is part of a discussion so that women in the household also have access to that information. It's basically a combination of the farmers receive the message about weather forecasting, as you see on the screen, and then there's an intentional follow-up and meeting in which we discuss the message so that information is disseminated more broadly and they understand that it's available, trying to improve the inclusivity of the activity, but also sort of the empowerment that women can gain from information in rural communities in the countries we work. On the left-hand side of your screen, this is again another rotation, the demonstration plot. We use this type of learning by doing and integrate it into our training and extension approach so farmers can see the value in crop rotations. There's soybean on the right-hand side and groundnuts or peanuts on the left-hand side of your screen. And there's a lot of co-benefits that you get from rotating legumes with grain crops like maize and sorghum and others, including the fixation of nitrogen, as well as It can help with, there's some terminating elements that groundnuts and soybeans provide to the soil that can help to limit certain weed regeneration, which helps with productivity. All of this is intended broadly to increase productivity on smaller plots of land so farmers can have food security, sustainable incomes, and can contribute to sustainable production goals in the long term. This is a picture from Kenya. This is a zero grazing or a semi-zero grazing cut and carry system. Again, another system, if you just Google those terms, they'll come right up with some articles that you could look into to dig into it deeper. But the important point here is the farmer is bringing grass that is an improved variety that can withstand drought to the cows. This is a dairy cow. The cow is producing more milk with better feed and better health. The farmer is actually taking the manure from this corral and this structure that she's created that is going to be allowed to then be used in the fields for that fodder to be created, that grass, but also in her agricultural fields where she's producing other crops for her family. The female farmer is at the door of the corral right now, letting the cows back in to feed. This also lowers heat stress in the animal, which decreases the level of methane emissions overall. If you have healthy animals that are not in smaller quantities overall, healthy animals that are not heat stressed, that have proper nutrition, that are receiving vaccinations and deworming, you actually lower their GHG, their methane emissions, because you're decreasing the amount of gas that they have. So there's co-benefits here that you have to start to think about when you're thinking about the SDGs in terms of what is appropriate for that context. So food and nutrition security. What does NURU do to support food and nutrition security? Primarily our focus in the places we work is to support higher protein and more diverse foods that limit post-harvest losses. That's the goal here, right? And that goes back to this definition of food security, meaning all people have physical, social, economic access to sufficient and safe, nutritious food that meets their food preferences and dietary needs. We're not saying you have to eat this. We're talking to the community about what is appropriate. What do you want? How can we help design an intervention at NURU to make sure that we can help improve the amount and the safety of the food that you have over time? So we focus on crops and livestock products and value chains, like with vegetables, and I'll show a picture of some permagarden activities we've done in Nigeria as well. With meat, but again, livestock are integral to smallholder production systems in order to ensure there's enough natural resource to regenerate the soil so that there is enough productivity in the long term to not need a dependency on chemical fertilizers again. And so there's a connection there, a co-benefit that can exist between SDG12 and SDG2. Legumes are also very high in protein, as many of us know, with whether it's beans, whether it's chickpeas, whatever you generally eat at home. This is also something that we're promoting more and more of because they have benefits in the production system, like I mentioned, but they also are highly nutritious. Storage of these grains, we use a technology called Purdue Improved Crop Storage Bags, PICS bags. It's a typo, the S should be capitalized. But that acronym is essentially, and I'll show a picture of these in a moment, it's a 3-ply plastic bag that cuts off the airflow to seeds that have been harvested, which limits fungal growth and limits pest and insect attacks on that seed, which means it maintains its quality, its safety, and its nutrition for longer, right? So that's less food wasted. And we usually see PICS bags prevent about 20 to 30% of food waste that's avoided on farm and at the household for rural communities, which also improves the quality of it for what they can sell into local markets so that they get more income from it. So there's not just an improvement in food security, there's not just a limited food waste, there is also an opportunity to gain more income from having higher quality and more produce to sell. So there's there's definitely 3 wins that take place just from a simple technology such as this, which I'll show in just a second. Another part of this that's very important, and I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker, is integrating the gender minimum standards into all of our interventions. And this includes do no harm policies and targeting women, which I mentioned, as well as healthy behavior promotion around water and sanitation principles and utilizing care groups, which is a solidarity group of women who talk about the things that are important to them in their household, and also how to promote adoption of healthier behaviors in their households. So quickly, here's a picture of a permagarden in Northeast Nigeria, which is intending to control water flow while also maximizing the amount of water available during sporadic and ever-changing rainy seasons to increase the productive quality of vegetables that are very healthy in the household. On the left-hand side of your screen here is a PICS bag. It's one of our farmers from southern region of Ethiopia who's part of a union cooperative who's demonstrating a PICS bag and explaining its importance to New Ethiopia staff. This picture was actually from about 6 years ago, but it's still highly relevant to our work and the importance of post-harvest loss prevention. And on the right-hand side is another legume, mung beans, in a crop rotation with maize, which is up on the hill to the right-hand side. Mung beans, I think it's something along the lines of 100 grams of edible mung beans or green gram has 23 grams of protein. So it's a highly nutritious food that builds food security while also promoting sustainable production. So quickly, what are some of the lessons learned? Immediate household food security and sustainable production is complicated and context specific, but these shocks aren't going anywhere. Just because there is a conflict in Ukraine doesn't mean farmers in Ethiopia aren't suffering from price spikes and inflation. Just because there's a conflict in Palestine and between Israel and Palestine doesn't mean that that doesn't have effects in other parts of the world. Just because COVID-19 is highly concentrated as a public health issue in one part of the world potentially, or seen as that, even though it's a global pandemic, it has spillover economic effects that affect everyone. So we have to be thinking about how do we improve the resilience of production, production systems, and resilience of food security interventions that try to benefit communities around the world. This all requires patience, especially this transition to sustainable production. Whether it's industrial agriculture or it's smallholder agriculture. My experience at World Wildlife Fund before was the same thing. And I have a family of farmers that I still talk with back in the United States. You have to be patient, and it can't be ideological. It has to be based on co-benefits that are gained from shifting production practices to regenerative or more sustainable production. And that really does require patience. It also requires behavior change communication, right? Which is some of the things we've heard in a number of the other presenters today. Large shifts in production and consumption under SDG 12 require the diffusion of innovation to be applied and assumed as part of our nature as human beings. A very oversimplified depiction of the behavior change curve or diffusion of innovation curve is below, but it takes time, right? We need innovators, we need early adopters, and we need a majority to take on this behavior, and then eventually we start to see it increase in terms of overall adoption, and it just becomes a norm at that stage, right? So there's a patience that comes with this. Also a number of ways to influence it. And just to say, technology is a risk factor in a number of ways, but it also gives us one of the best opportunities to increase the level of behavior change communication we can provide the world, provide on key issues. And then the last thing I'll say before I'll try to pause and hopefully only went a few minutes over the 30 minutes that we talked about initially. There's obvious nexus goals within the SDGs, but as was talked about by Omar at the outset when the introduction and everyone else throughout, there's integration across the SDGs. SDG 12 in particular, sustainable production, really does require peace. It requires stability. It requires good governance. It requires gender equality. And without those things, we're not going to see the type of progress we all truly want to see in terms of the proliferation of sustainable production around the world. It also requires in rural communities, whether it's the United States or it's Ethiopia or Kenya, it requires infrastructure. We can't ever forget that part, right? It requires roads. Agriculture and access to markets requires roads and well-maintained roads. And without that, it's very difficult for someone to get something to market without an increasing cost of transportation. And lastly, and most importantly to this workshop today, I mean, university partnerships play a number of roles that all of my co-presenters have laid out. For my type of work at NURU, where we're implementing, one of the partnerships we value the most is implementation-based research projects, which are crucial to achieving the SDGs. And this really means that universities play a crucial role as a third-party validator of impact, of measurement, of evidence, that and driving learning, because donors also trust that third-party validation. When I make a claim at NURU, it's not as valuable as when Ray Marshall Center and University of Texas at Austin validates that, right? So we have to make sure that these partnerships have very clear research-related projects that they can focus on, and partnerships that have opportunities for shared learning to be disseminated. So with that, I just want to say thank you for listening. And yeah, I'll open it to questions or wherever we need to take the discussion at this point, Alicia.
Thank you so much, Casey. This is wonderful. What a journey you've taken us in all the work that you do, which is fantastic. I know in different countries in Africa. I know Lynette is here. She was saying, Lynette, do you want to say something? You're from Kenya, right? Have you heard of
Yes.
Nuru International or anything of your opinion about what you heard?
Hi, thanks for asking, Alicia. I haven't yet heard of it, but now that I have heard from Casey, I will find out. I live in Nairobi, and Migori is about just over 500 kilometers from Nairobi. So I am interested in finding out more about it and probably finding out whether there is anything I can, be connected with them to do, or at least even just to learn. I was very happy to see the lady farmer with her very healthy cow. And it's probably something other parts of Kenya could borrow. So I am keen to find out what is happening. Thank you for sharing, Casey. And next time you're in Kenya, find me.
Karibu sana, Lynette. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll be happy to introduce you to the Nuru Kenya team if that's something you're interested in. And thanks for joining us so late in the evening. I appreciate you staying on.
Thank you. Maybe, Alicia, if you could allow me to say that I also work within the university subsector. I work with the regulatory agency for university education. It's called the Commission for University Education. And we have been trying to mainstream education for sustainable development together with the Kenya National Commission to UNESCO. So I was happy to learn when you talked about universities, because I believe indeed that universities have what it takes to deliver on all the 17 SDGs in their various areas of study and engagement. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an aspect that I think is important. We haven't mentioned too much about the SDG 4 as well as on education. And sometimes we get the notion that is quality education, formal education, but actually it is important, like what you are doing in Nuru, etc., is as well this non-formal education that is happening. Maybe it's not a school, but it's an education is happening in the communities, the learning of the new conditions that are happening. How are they gonna learn about these regenerative ways of producing, and hopefully connect with other aspects that are important for their quality of life, etc. So I think in that sense it's very important. That is another SDGs that can help to connect the work that Nuru and the civil society can do with universities. What Lynette is saying is, and universities, and I think from the side of universities, from this other side, this is another way to do research, and I think Casey has mentioned that it's like this transdisciplinary research. Sometimes it's starting, and sometimes it's difficult to do that work. But I was happy to hear that now there's this trend in many universities, especially in the framework of education for sustainable development, to lead on sustainability science, that you realize you cannot continue to work in silos in the disciplines, but you need to connect. And the transdisciplinarity, what asks universities is to say, well, it's not only academic knowledge that is important, is the knowledge that that farmer has, that indigenous person has, that civil society, that all these type of knowledge perspectives are so important and should get in the plan and the research methodology, and create something that emerge as important as the work that you're doing. So I think it's the sum of all these variables, all this knowledge that are important. So I think should promote more the transdisciplinary research, and from the university side, we should learn more and these methodologies, and we can learn from NGOs like you. So I don't know if someone else would like to open your mic or say something. I didn't see other comments. I don't know. But
I saw a question from Lee in the.
Lee.
Go ahead, Lee. Yeah, go ahead.
Lee. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, Casey, do you work with schools as well? Do you involve them in the actions, the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't have like a formal education program where we work with government-sponsored schools, but what we do have in Kenya is a technical vocation and training college, so a TVET institute that Nuru Kenya has established. So again, SDG4 qualifies, TVETs as another form of formal education. So I didn't mention that because I had so much to get out such a short period of time, but they have established a TVET school. They're providing two types of sort of blended digital training opportunities that target rural farmers and farmer cooperatives, as well as in-person extended long courses in which students can pay a very small tuition that just includes the coverage of food and board, come to a location and learn practically about regenerative farming practices, improved dairy practices, and a number of other activities. We only do that in Kenya right now. So that's the only place where we have that activity formally established, but it's a very important part of the training approach that I discussed for the Nuru Kenya team.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. In terms of, also, I was thinking when you were talking about the regenerative agriculture, the importance of these livestock crop systems that are happening there. But is this type of system applied in different countries? Like, for example, in rainforest, in tropical areas with rainforests, etc. Or are these regenerative agriculture methodologies differ depending on the type of ecosystem you are?
Yeah, it will definitely depend on the type of ecosystem you're in, but the agroecology of that place, the landscape itself, it'll depend on topography as much as it will also depend on hydrology of the area. I think overall, the important takeaway is trying to optimize for integrated animal and crop livestock where relevant. But this is a concept called, but also including agroforestry and forest, and it's called silvopastoralism or silvopastoral approaches, which you integrate tree production and tree growth with animal husbandry and animal management, and then crop production. And these types of systems tend to be applied in landscapes with kind of a flatter, expanded landscape, semi-arid in a lot of cases, but you also see it applied even here in Costa Rica, down in around Osa Peninsula and other areas where you've seen some producers transition to more sustainable production methods for livestock production. The challenge it has is really market-based. There's a number of other factors to play out in terms of head of cattle necessary, carrying capacity of the land. A lot of those systems thinking level of concepts have to be applied in order to identify what's most appropriate. And for us, that's why we're not ever claiming that one system is best or one approach is best for each place. It's really working collaboratively with local stakeholders to identify the solution that's most demanded, but also leans on research and science in terms of what's needed. So it really does require that kind of local multi-stakeholder approach to be applied if you want to see people feel enabled to adopt new practices.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. So anyone has another comment or question? If not, I think we've done a great job with time. I imagine the plan was to finish at 11:30 Costa Rica time, depending on where you are. So I think we're reaching the time of closing, and I'm very happy. I don't know if Agabi Montero or Amanda want to say something before we close.
No, just thank you, Casey, very much for your time and your disposition to share with us what you do. And thank you everybody also for hanging in there and staying with us during this time of the workshop.
Okay, Amanda, you have something? No, okay. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much, as Gabby said, for your time, for your presence, which is very valuable. One of the messages as well that for me was important is that, yeah, we not any effort that we do is insignificant, as Professor Salvetti was saying, and Casey was sharing something that is also important for the Earth Charter, and as well at UPeace is this idea of community, of network, that together we are more. Together, of course, that's obvious, but not even one and one is three. Our collective efforts will be amplified if we try to. So let's try to reach out. Let's try to be connected in wherever forms you find, and that will just, I think, probably give us light. I heard that Nuru means light, right, Helena? That's what I'm saying. So
it does. It means
that's
light
nice.
in Kiswahili. Yeah.
Nice. So it gives us light. It give us Nuru. for the path that we need, especially taking into account future generations of our current generation, but them as well. Okay, so have a great day or evening or night, and we'll be in touch. You'll receive the recording as well. Bye.
Thank you so much for organizing. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.